Joining us to talk about what's going on in New York City, Mr. David Webb from Tea Party 365 and the host of the David Webb Show, right here on Sirius XM Patriot 125. How you doing, David?
Hey, I'm doing great, Cam. I got to tell you, I'm a big kid who had a great about 10 days now.
So, how long were you actually on the USS Iwo Jima?
I was on it from Sunday night till Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
I left Norfolk, came up to New York, and boy, talk about coming into up the harbor and up the Hudson River. Looking at that from the bridge of the Iwo Jima, just phenomenal.
Oh, I can't imagine. Well, listen, I'm jealous of your experience. This was your first time, right?
Yeah, I did something with them last year, but that was just in port.
Yeah.
This was the full access. Everything was great. They didn't say no to anything.
That's very cool. Did they let you touch any buttons while you were there?
No, I wanted to go over to fire control and play with a couple of the buttons, maybe launch a Sea Sparrow or two, but they thought that was a bad idea. I don't know why.
The David Webb missile crisis of 2011. Castro, we're coming for you. Hugo, wake up, buddy. It's suddenly Chavez. All right, so you had a great time. Met a lot of wonderful people, I am sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you, if you want to talk about reasons to be proud of professionals, of Americans who've raised their right hand, of all ages. I mean, there are kids on this thing. Let's call it what it is. They're 18 and 19-year-olds that have just gotten through boot in the Marines and some in the Navy, and they were on this ship. They're seasoned officers as well, but they're all professionals, and they have, as Captain Chassie explained to me when I did my show from the flight deck, they have an awesome responsibility, not just for a $50 million airplane or whatever the case, but for lives which are invaluable.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. Well, listen, so you get back to New York, where you are confronted by stories like this. I mean, which is the sort of the opposite of the bravery and the heroism and the intelligence on display. The latest idea to bring down violent crime in New York, which is, by the way, David, one of the few places in the country where violent crime went up last year, not down. While Mayor Bloomberg was trying to play America's mayor and having his Mayors Against Illegal Guns group try to change the gun laws, violent crime goes up in New York City. Now they're hoping to have a quote-unquote buyback, where they're asking criminals to just turn in their guns in exchange for a $200 prepaid gift card. No questions asked.
Look, they've tried this, Cam. I've seen it tried in Dallas, Texas, in Philadelphia, and cities all over the country, especially in Chicago where they do this, it seems, every couple of months at some times. It rarely ever does anything more than move a few people off the street. So when you have the kind of people that you want the guns, you want to get the guns out of their hands, they're not going to turn in a gun for $200 when they can go out and commit a crime and grab a few thousand, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's that same principle that they're making laws and using programs for people who, by their very nature, don't follow the laws.
Well, no, that's exactly right. But, the other aspect of it is David, here, like I said, New York, one of the few places around the country where violent crime went up. Murders up 14% last year. And this is the response? Let's try something that we know doesn't work, that has been, proven to be ineffective. Hey, New Yorkers, this is what we're giving you.
Versus programs that do work. Look, I got a lot of great guys in NYPD. They come through for me. They're professionals. There have been programs where you put the cops in the neighborhoods, you put them on the beat. In some cases, they make it so that they can live in the area, have a real presence on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And when cops are there and they get to know who the troublemakers are, who's that kid that's on the edge or that guy that's on the edge, and they have that constant presence. There's one program that actually has been very successful for police departments.
Yeah.
Instead, they come up with these, what I called another social engineering. We're going to make a big show. We're going to buy back guns. They're going to run a story saying we spent this much money to get all these guns off the street, and I can guarantee you that in half those neighborhoods I can walk right around the corner and buy a gun.
Yeah, despite New York City's vaunted gun laws.
Right, and let me make this clear. Look, I'm all for getting guns off the street out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. And maybe there's that guy Cam that did something by buying an illegal weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If that person says, "Boy, I don't want to get in trouble, but here's my chance to get rid of it," then I'm all for that. But by the way, in most cities, and again, laws vary. If you really want to take care of something like that, there is a way you can do it. So you don't need these buybacks.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure if you called the New York Police Department and said, "Hey, you know what? I did something, and I just want it to go away. I haven't used it in a crime. You can trace it or test or whatever." I'm sure they'd be more than happy to help.
In New York, they might give you a little harder time. You mentioned the key inhibitor of doing something like that is Mayor Bloomberg's anti-gun policy.
Yes, but
I shouldn't say anti. Well, it is anti-gun.
But
they don't allow you to do something to get rid of something bad without charging you with the mandatory sentence. And look, I believe in strict sentencing for criminals that commit crimes with guns.
But see, that's who commit crimes with guns. I mean, that's the key point here is, Mayor Bloomberg, again, a few years ago, he said he was going to get tough on illegal gun possession in New York, lobbied Albany and said, all right, we need a mandatory minimum 3.5-year prison sentence if you're caught in illegal possession with a firearm in New York City, and that'll cut down. And we're hearing that, again, more than half of the cases in New York City are still being plea bargained down to probation, no time at all. And the average sentence is right around 1.5 years. It's not the 3.5-year sentence. Look at what Plaxico Burress received and what the other celebrities who've been arrested with a gun that they aren't allowed to own in New York City have gotten. None of them have gotten the 3.5-year mandatory minimum that Mayor Bloomberg said was so important. So, we hear this tough talk, but it's not followed through, and it certainly isn't followed through when we're talking about people who have committed violent crimes. I mean, people who have been proven, okay, not only did you, possess a gun in violation of New York City's gun laws, but you committed a violent act against another person, and we're still seeing those people get what amounts to slaps on the wrist.
Right, and it doesn't help. Look, and as a Giants fan, believe me, it pained me to see the stupidity that Plaxico Burress did cost us a championship, but that's another story for another time.
Yeah.
But when you have a high-profile figure, you have a mandatory sentence, you don't carry it out, well, you put a judge in a tough position, because if a judge gives a mandatory sentence to someone else, then that person's attorney comes back and they argue that, hey, here's what happened to Plaxico Burress. Why is my guy getting different treatment? So this conundrum for the judges, and I know a few of them, is, we have a mandatory sentence, we plea bargain cases, and we leave ourselves in a position of constant appeal. So that ties up the court system on top of that.
All right. Well, listen, David, I don't know what's going to happen in New York City. I wish that...
Well, Cam, I got to tell you, what's going to happen a lot, too, is we always see a rise in crimes, and certainly in violent crimes, unfortunately, in a bad economy.
No, we don't. I'm going to disagree with you. We have not seen that since 2008. That's when the economy started to tank. In 2008, 2009, 2010, the economy has been in the gutter, and violent crime has dropped every year.
But in some inner city areas, in lower income areas, and I should have qualified that. If you look at Bureau of Justice statistics, in lower income areas, that's what I should have said. You do see that spike. Unfortunately, that's a reality, and it's an extrapolation from the general population. And we're seeing that in some areas around the country right now.
Some areas, but not all.
Not all.
Not all, because these low-income areas, David, they're low-income areas regardless of what the overall economy is doing. They're crappy areas when the economy's booming. They're crappy areas when the economy's tanking.
Yeah. Look, there's no one answer to all of this.
Not at all.
But these big shows, that the bravado and whatever, don't do the job. The real job needs to be done by the cop on the beat, by the law-abiding citizens, and by laws that let you punish those that do the wrong thing, and then work with those that want to get out of something before they do the wrong thing.
Where do you think and I agree with you on all of those, but I'm curious, I would have said that parents and family is in there too.
Very much an important part of it. Again, let me go into some of the areas, and since we're talking about the Bronx,
yeah,
heavily black and Hispanic communities, where there is a lower unit family of a man and a wife and children, where they've removed the man from the household, and you look at the majority of these crimes that are committed by males, where it really takes a man to raise a boy into a man. He controls those boundaries more than a woman can, and that's a fact. And it's been proven time and time again. So in these communities, you have these kids that have never, frankly, had themselves slapped into the right line, not violently, but just kind of kept in the right line by a parental, by a father figure.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with you there. I think it can be done. I think my wife is a perfect example who raised two kids in Camden, New Jersey, and my son, who's now 20, turned out fine. Spent the first 6 years of his life living in a really crummy neighborhood. So it can be done, but is it easier when you've got a real father figure around? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And sadly, the other aspect is when there is a father figure around, in a lot of these high-crime neighborhoods, David, you're looking at a father figure who's also a gang member, and maybe the grandfather figure is also a gang member because we have multi-generational gangs now.
Right, and that is something that will not be fixed until we go in and clean up some of these communities. Two, we have to find something else for these people to do, and there's education that's needed here. And it's look, we talk for hours before we even get started on this. But the family unit leads to better education. Better education leads to better economic outcomes, whether it's a small business just working in the factory or going to a corporation. So you're right. It's the family unit that's the real genesis of this. And look, in the black community, in areas like the Bronx, where there's been generational crime, generational poverty since basically civil rights in the 60s, these people have not gotten any return on investment for their vote for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no, I no quibble with you there. I mean, you can look at city after city, and you can see the ruins that these communities are in. And if you want to be generous, we could say it's one-party rule for decades. If you want to be, I think, more realistic, I think it is the type of one-party rule that you've seen in places like Albany since, the 1920s.
Well, let's go right down the line. Let's look at the top cities in the poverty rate list. You've got cities like Detroit, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Cleveland, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Philly, Newark, New Jersey, which has fallen off the top 10, and I don't remember all the others. But a lot of these have had one-party rule, no Republican mayor or governor, no Republican mayor in the cities, rather.
Yeah.
And you look at the type of laws and legislation within these cities, constant attempts to put patches, to kind of put a Band-Aid on the problem rather than tackling the problem with some hard solutions. In that respect, the city has abrogated its fatherly responsibility, if you will. So again, you have a city out of control, and you mentioned Camden. Well, we know that city. I'm glad your wife did that, but let's think about all the others in Camden where there's a 70% or close to it failure rate for graduation.
Yep.
Where they created a system to let kids say they graduated high school when they're illiterate. Mm-hmm. There's failures all across the board there.
No, you're David. You're right, and there is no, and you keep coming back to something. There is no easy answer. I mean, anytime you hear some politicians say, "All right, what we got to do here is we're going to have this buyback," and and they'll say, "Look, this isn't going to solve the world, but we got to do something." No, you don't have to do something. Doing the right thing is more important than doing something.
Right, and absolutely, what politicians fail to do is instead of looking for policies and long-term solutions, they look for what I call election cycle fixes. Mm-hmm. I put a patch on it. It looks good. In November, I get reelected.
Yep.
Guys, if you have a generational problem, it takes 18 years old before you matriculate legally to be a man. It takes you into your mid-20s before you mature. You can't have a 2-year fix for a 25-year problem.
Amen. David, always a real pleasure to get a chance to catch up with us, sir. Thanks for coming on the program tonight.
Anytime.
David Webb, host of the David Webb Show right here on Sirius XM Patriot 125, and the founder of Tea Party 365 in New York City as well.